Peace, peace, family. Today I want to talk about the Holy Death, or la Santa Muerte, la Santísima Muerte, la Niña Blanca, the holiest death, the holy death, the little white girl, la Flaquita, the skinny one. So, in dealing with the Holy Death, today I want to talk a little bit about her altar setup. I want to talk about her correspondences, her vices, and her do's and don'ts. First and foremost, in dealing with the Holy Death, you want to be very clear of what type of relationship that you want to have with her. Because she is not an energy that you just work with and just quit. It's more of a relationship. And she can represent the maiden, mother, and crone energy. And she gives out harsh life lessons to teach us that ignorance isn't the same as innocence. So let's go over her correspondences. Let's start with the scythe. She has the scythe because the scythe is one of her main tools that helps to lead her to the underworld, as she acts as a tour guide to carry you over when you transition. She has skulls. Skulls represent her because skulls can represent the ancestors, the dead, spirits, immortality. She also has the world, which you can see she has the world in her hands. Why? Because she has the world in her hands and control of it. As you can see, she also has the scales, because the scales represent balance, kind of like Mayat. Whenever they weigh that feather against your heart, and if your heart is heavier than that feather, you know you got your judgment. You've been judged. For judgment comes to us all. She also has the hourglass, for no one can escape time or death, because death equals transformation. She also has the owl. As you can see, her owls are right here. The owls represent wisdom. They are the seers, the messengers of God. They're like her eyes and ears. Even though in Mexico, we know that they have a thing, or the white owl, called the lechuza, which is a bad omen. But this is totally different. This is a good sign, a good omen. She also has La Cruz de Cartavaca, the Cruz of Cartavaca, which is used in hoodoo and Santeria as a protective sigil. So we went over the scythe, we went over the skulls, the scales, the hourglass, the world, the owls, La Cruz de Cartavaca. So those are some of her main correspondences. So in dealing with her vices, some of her must-have things that you must have on her altar are flowers. She especially loves roses, whether it be white or red roses. Even if you can just put one, it's the thought that counts. So I have roses on her altar. She also likes liquor. So as you can see, I have tequila, because tequila is one of her favorite drinks. So I always pour tequila. Everything in moderation, nothing in excess. Another one of her must-haves are apples, because apples are her absolute favorite. The red apple can represent power, and the green apple can represent prosperity manifestations. Besides the candle, because the candle is an offering, and that is obvious, you'll also like to give her cigars. She likes good cigars, not cheap cigars. And if you can't afford a cigar, you can get her a nice strong cigarette, maybe a Newport or a Marlboro. And if you can't afford a cigarette, then you can get her a nice Black and Mild. Of course, water, because water represents healing energy. Water can also clear out negative space in the area. And if you can do a little extra, some candies. Some decent type of candies, because he doesn't like cheap candies. So, some candies, what and whatnot. So we went over the correspondences. We went over some of her vices, some of her must-haves. You can also give her a plate of, beans and rice with some type of, carne frita, con tostones or something like that, depending on your region, will depict what type of offerings that you give her. Now, as you can see, I have several candles lit, and each candle is a different spell. The white candle is to remove any negativity and for protection. The black candle is for banishing. The red candle is for power, and it can also represent the divine feminine. The white candle is basically an offering to her with her icon on it. And as you can see, I have one for the ancestors and the spirits, as she governs over the ancestors and acts as a guide as well. So now let's go over the do's and don'ts. When working with the Holy Death, you do not want to put her on an altar with another deity. She does not share an altar. Number 2, you never ever give her any items or offerings that have already been given to another deity. You do not recycle vices, offerings, and gifts, around with and whatnot. She doesn't like secondhand things. Number 3, you never want to leave her in the dark. A traditional altar usually has Christmas lights or some type of artificial light that's set up to keep her always in the light, because she's kind of like, she's kind of like your lighting house, your lighthouse. Your lighthouse is a point of reference. She's that point of reference. In dealing with the Holy Death, you want to put her up basically on a higher altar, but as this is a demonstrational altar, it's a little bit lower. But in her shrine, on her shrine in my spiritual room, it is way higher. It is probably about halfway past the window, and whatnot, because she likes to be in high places. Another thing is, you never want to put her in a closet or hide her or be ashamed of her. She loves to be out in the open, and she loves to be talked about, and she knows when she's being talked about. So think of you being put in a corner or being put on punishment in a corner. You wouldn't feel so good. So think about that when you're doing that with her. Never bring an energy in your home that you are ashamed to deal with, or that you think you have to hide when company comes over. The same way you can work that energy when no one's around, and devote your time and energy and leave her out in the open. You should be able to do the same thing when company comes over. Not necessarily do a working in front of company, but she shouldn't have to be hidden, and you shouldn't have to explain anything. In dealing with the Holy Death, once you put her on the altar, she is not to be moved. Anytime you move her, you would like to tell her what you are doing and explain why you're moving her. For example, if you're cleaning her, what and whatnot, and like taking things off the altar to cleanse off the altar and to reconsecrate it, to bless it again, then put it back on, she understands things of that nature. But once you put her on the altar, she is not to be moved. And there are many different types of holy deaths. You have like the Victorian collection, and then you have the ones that come from Mexico that are dressed or that are fixed, such as this one. Sometimes you get the Cruz of Caravaca, pennies, a horseshoe, herbs and spices, and things of that nature. Okay, so I've gone over the altar and correspondences. I've went over some of her vices and some of her must-have things on her altar, her offerings and why, and the corresponding things that pertain to her and why we put those offerings on there. I've also gone over the do's and don'ts. I think I'm going to add in her scythe, because a lot of people wonder or have seen on their altar the scythe being moved or her statue being moved in a different position. And those are one of three things. Number 1, that she doesn't like the altar that she is on and she wants to be moved. Number 2, she is giving you a warning. And number 3, maybe she's in a position with a conflicting energy, such as an ancestor or another god or goddess, that they don't quite get along. And once again, you should move her in a different area, or move that god or goddess, depending how she divines to you. But these are some of the basic things that I have set up. This is just a basic working altar. A lot of devotees have a more complex altar with the Holy Death with the 7 different colors, because the 7 different colors can represent the 7 different paths of the Holy Death. And as you can see, on a traditional altar, we also use cascarilla, powdered eggshell. But other than that, family, this is my basic little bitty altar setup. Shout out to all the devotees and the Muertistas, because I am a Muertista. Peace.